Hello and welcome. We are the Ministry of the Raw Truth. Unfortunately, we cannot show you on our channel the documentary in full that we discovered online at a certain website due to possible copyright claims, etc. So we will first relay all that we watched, discovered, which totally blew our mind via this particular documentary, which proves that Jesus the Christ actually existed. In this particular documentary, at 6:34 to 6:52 of the 1 hour 23 minute documentary, the unearthed ancient mosaic in Megiddo was found and translated by experts, which reads from the Greek that a lady offered Jesus the Christ a table at her food stand or her venue or place to eat. Through this, there can no longer be any claim that Jesus the Christ never existed. Many may come to us and say, there was probably many Jesuses walking around in that particular era, blah blah blah, that location, as there were many Muhammads alive after the death of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, and there's many today called Muhammad as their first name, or have his last name, have his name as their last name, family name, etc., because they feel, we can draw some magic or inspiration from Muhammad, the prophet Muhammad, and all this sort of stuff. They have their different reasons. So there's many of them running around in this modern day and era. Yeah, true. But none in that era were specifically born and called by the ancient Greeks Jesus, or Jesus in the English, or Jesus the Christ in the English. We have read that, or heard too, through this documentary, that Armageddon is a secondary term for an actual place in Israel, in the Hebrew Megiddo. With this conspiracy theory, evangelical translation of the scripture saying, this great battle's going to happen at the end of the world, everyone's going to die, it'll get totally wiped out, great battle, and all this sort of stuff, where they march on Israel or whatever. Yeah. But in the Hebrew, it's Megiddo. In ancient times, different nations had different battles at Megiddo, like the Egyptian king against his enemy with chariots and spears, etc. This is mentioned at 7:02 in the documentary. It is also said in the documentary that a mosaic inscription, another one that was found, became a big sensation when it was mentioned, because it proved that Jesus Christ was in a public building. It was recorded, historically recorded, for the first time ever, when it was found and then mentioned. Obviously, the Pope at the time was interested, the head of the Christian communities and so forth, when that one was discovered. Another one, like that one in particular, was discovered, excavated and discovered, and deemed the major discovery of the decade. It's at 7:25 of this particular documentary. We'll leave a link for you to go and watch it. You'll find it very, very interesting. Yes, it had been said within the documentary, the mosaic inscription uncovered became the big sensation in its day. As it made the mention of Jesus the Christ being in a public building, and it was recorded, historically recorded, okay, on one of these mosaics. So again, that verifies that Jesus the Christ was a real guy that actually existed. He wasn't a fairy tale and so forth. Okay, so we, being a channel that brings you the Galilean Aramaic New Testament translated into the English equivalent by the native-born Aramaic speaking translator Victor N. Alexander. Have come across Revelation, book of Revelation 16, where he has translated it faithfully from those original hidden and preserved texts of the, or manuscripts of the original ancient, very old apostolic church of the East, erroneously called the Nestorian Church, which was restored. It was destroyed in the 13th century, and then obviously it's been restored in modern times. So we're going to have a look at those. Revelation chapter 16, where it reads, and they gathered, certain peoples gathered to that place, or a particular place, which is called in Hebrew Armageddon. Has a footnote indicated there. So we're going to look at those footnotes. 16, literal Aramaic idiom or expression. City of defilement, or Nazi Berlin. And the seventh angel that John saw via his vision, spilled his chalice, or a big jug, right? It usually holds water or wine, something like that. He spills his chalice in the air, right? And a great voice emerged from the temple that declared, "Here it comes." Yeah, temple of God, yeah, kingdom of God, right? That temple. Look, here it comes, right? And there was lightning and thunder and sounds, and there was a great earthquake, like there never was since there were human beings on earth. So this is the biggest earthquake compared to every other earthquake that's ever been on the earth. This was a major earthquake, the biggest of them all, right? So great an earthquake there occurred, and that great city, a certain great city, was split for the three of them. Footnote indicated there. Okay. It's 1619. I guess it's Berlin. Okay. It's probably after everything, right? After it was all over, World War II, etc. was over, then it becomes West Berlin, East Berlin, and Berlin, right? Maybe. That's how he's seeing it. And there was lightning and thunder and sounds, and there was a great earthquake like there's never been since human beings on earth. So great an earthquake there occurred. And that great city was split for the three of them, and the cities of the nation fell. So all these other nations fell to this terror, right? This thing that happened, this wrath of God. And Babylon the Great was remembered before Allah, or God, for all the evils that she had done down through the centuries, right? As it was given the cup of wine of that ferment of Allah's anger. Okay, so the wrath of God was upon it for all its crimes, killing of the saints, etc. And every island ran away, and there were no mountains to be found. Well, this is probably allegorical or symbolic, metaphorical. Okay, because if they're all gone, then there's no mountains, nothing. I guess that might just defy logic, common sense, reality, right? This is probably metaphorical. Okay, it appears that, like, you can't see these things, right? Unless it's speaking of something else in the future, like conspiracy theorists, evangelists, or that sort of thing might say, "Oh, that's nuclear bomb and the world's over," something like that, right? But it may not mean that in the Galilean Aramaic, translated into the nearest English equivalent. And a great hail, heavy like talents. So this could mean that this next thing that happened, like, you couldn't see because of the dust and the smoke and all this sort of stuff, right? And a great hail, heavy like talents. That's Greek coins, very heavy. So you could probably be able to tell if someone had them in there. toga or on their person, whatever, to make a lot of noise. Very heavy to carry, possibly. Greek coins fell from the sky over humanity. So this is metaphorical, allegorical, it's symbolic, right? And those people blasphemed. They talked a lot of nonsense against God, blaming God, right? Because of the punishment of that hail. 1629, literal Aramaic idiom or expression, plague. Okay? For great was its striking power indeed. It's probably not talking about the Vatican or anything like that as of yet, okay, because it's probably talking about Berlin, okay, this Hebrew, this Armageddon, right, because of what was going on there. According to Rabbi Reuven in his video Warning to the Jews, all this sort of stuff, it's pretty much the same, but he goes deeper than what this native-born Aramaic translator Victor Alexander has in regards to these revelations, right? The book of Revelation by John in his visions, right? Okay, so this falls on their heads, right? So here in the footnotes it has 1616, literal Aramaic idiom or expression, city of defilement or Nazi Berlin. 1617, literal Aramaic idiomatic expression is happening in World War II. So that was the start of World War II. That's explaining this plague, the bombs, okay, suddenly falling on people's heads. It's all symbolic, like the talents falling from the sky, falling from the air on people's heads, and they're cursing God and all that sort of stuff. Okay. We've actually seen, okay, it was a game, a Vietnam game where you go run to the gunnery range or the gun range, and you pass a couple of white guys during this Vietnam War on their base, and a black guy, and saying, "Hey man, it's the Armageddon, man, you know, the Bible, all this sort of stuff." It's quite interesting. You stand there and listen to what they say and say, "What are you standing here for? Get lost," you know, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's quite interesting that they actually mention it. Okay, and you run onto the gun range and you see the sergeant and all this sort of stuff, gives you orders, whatever. Okay, so it's all here, right? Okay, with Rabbi Reuven, he says, like in the 1920s, okay, here you got the Kings of the Sun, okay, 1612, literal Aramaic idiomatic construction, okay, it's an expression by these Eastern writers, probably John, okay, and the scribes, monks have hand copied it faithfully, you know, correctly and all that sort of stuff. Okay, from the east or rising of the sun. Nostradamus supposedly said these are the yellow peril or the Chinese amassing their army, 200 million, all this sort of stuff. But here it's not saying it. It's saying, yeah, sure, these people are from the east or the rising of the sun, not the rising sun. That would be the Japanese, right? It's not them. Okay, it's these people from the east, kings of the east. Okay, it's talking about these Jews. Okay, as Rabbi Reuven says in his particular video, they entered Berlin around 1920. They were there in 1930s. They owned everything, basically, as the history books show, you know. But they started to do unrighteous things, okay, of the flesh, etc., etc. So that eventually upset Adolf, and he decided, oh, I've got to put a stop to that, and it took about 6 years. So he stopped tax and all this sort of stuff, high interest loans and paybacks, and because he couldn't afford bread, you know, like you could have all the money in the world, the Reichsmarks, German money, but you couldn't buy a loaf of bread, all this sort of stuff. You have to go check out his video, Rabbi Reuven Warning to the Jews. Okay, pretty interesting stuff. It's a comparative. Okay, these two have never met, as far as we know, Rabbi Reuven and Victor and Alexander, but they're basically saying the same thing. You just need one more person that was saying the same thing, that probably from a different time set, you know, different era, that's saying the same thing. You could probably use Nostradamus, but his quotations probably aren't really the same, you know. They're different, right? Okay, he predicted seeing Hitler. We called him Hitler by mistake. Suppose he had visions of these German soldiers running past his carriage and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, but he had the idea that these kings of the sun were the yellow peril, the Chinese or something slightly different there, right? Okay, so you could possibly, let's say for argument's sake, you got that third guy, Nostradamus, so that establishes the facts. They're all in sync, right? So they become established facts. And you got to look for the evidence, right? That proves itself evident. You got to check out these writers, these claimants, see if they're irrefutable, infallible, and then their writings should be deemed, or their translations or whatever should be deemed irrefutable, infallible. You've got to do all this work. Okay? It just doesn't happen by a magic pull or wave or wand or wishful thinking. You've got to put in the work, personal research, study, investigative journalism, etc., etc. So we continue to watch this particular video. Okay, we probably already covered this, but this is an interesting one. When Jesus went to eat some food somewhere, sat down, this lady offered him a table. It actually says there, so not trying to pull the wool over your eyes, making false claims, etc. And one of them, it is a lady offering a table to the God Jesus Christ. It's here in the Greek. Okay. This here supposedly was created, maybe not this one, but maybe this one, or maybe the other one that was discovered. It was made or paid for by a Roman centurion. Okay, and it shows a picture of this guy. And he's quite dark. He's not black, but being out in the sun, you know, he might have been to different campaigns like Africa, North Africa, whatever, and got himself a darker complex, a tan. Okay. You know, imagine being out there for 2 years, marching. So under the sun, you know, with the sun beaming down on you for 2 years. So you wouldn't be purely white, or pearly white, would you? No, you'd have some sort of darker hue. So if you found this particular video interesting, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, add your comments, and we'll get back to you on those as soon as we can. And then go share this with friends, family, neighbours, strangers, etc. That, you know, you can verify that, yeah, Jesus the Christ actually existed because of these findings here in the Greek. Okay, at Megiddo in Israel, there's evidence there, and then there's the evidence that he was in a public building. It's historical, archaeological, historical record that, like this mosaic, that actually says in the Greek that he was there. Okay. So thank you for taking the time to watch this, our latest creative video upload. We really hope you enjoyed it.